What is up, everybody? Adam here from the Ferment Podcast and from Vineyard Worship. And I'm doing a little preamble. And the preamble is to point you in the direction of our friends at Vineyard USA because they just started a brand new podcast called We Are Vineyard. It is hosted by our very own National Director Jay Pathak himself. And I just want to say, if you're a leader in the Vineyard, if you're a pastor in the Vineyard, if you're someone who's Vineyard adjacent, if you're checking us out, if you want to know what is the Vineyard, is it the sort of place that might be your spiritual family? If you're just interested in the things we're up to, this is a podcast for you. You can check it out. It's going to be dropping every Wednesday. They're going to be talking to leaders inside of the Vineyard. They're going to be talking to authors and leaders outside of the Vineyard. They're doing book clubs. Heck, they're doing everything. And it's the sort of thing that will help you get through your week, and it'll connect you to the things that are happening inside of our movement. So do me a favor, go check it out wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, everybody. Peace.
We are Vineyard.
Somos Viña.
We are Vineyard.
To me, it was the mercy of God that in the very seed of the vineyard, that small group in Southern California were impressed that it was not to be a one-person centered ministry.
Yeah.
Because of all that happened, the explosion of ministry, growth, healing, deliverances, all of that easily could have made another big name, which in a sense it did. But in the very seed, in the wisdom of God, he made sure they understood, you're not to do this, you're to train all of the people to do this.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow in life with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, our host, Jay Pathak, talks with Phil Strout, former National Director for Vineyard USA.
Well, Phil, thanks for joining us in our first ever podcast.
Imagine that.
Hey, you're a trendsetter, man. That's what you do.
Yeah, it's always been said technology and the latest and the greatest with all this equipment and getting out over the airwaves. Actually, this morning somebody called me a nerd.
Well,
because they saw me sitting in front of a microphone, and I had to tell that person it's the first time that's ever happened.
Trendsetter and nerd all in one. Phil Strout. So Phil, I'm really excited to talk to you about what we're going to talk about today, which is equipping the saints. Because in the Vineyard, we've always said this is like a critical component of how we think about ministry, right?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Well, in referencing the Way On conference and what we addressed there, to me, it was the mercy of God that in the very seed of the vineyard, that small group in Southern California were impressed that it was not to be a one-person centered ministry.
Yeah.
Because of all that happened, the explosion of ministry, growth, healing, deliverances, all of that easily could have made another big name, which in a sense it did. But in the very seed, in the wisdom of God, he made sure they understood, no, you're not to do this. You're to train all of the people to do this. And I think that was, I don't think it was planned. I think it's something that happened. Because there's really none of our history says, here's the 5 things we're going to make the vineyard be.
Yeah.
As it started, they just realized, and I think it was Carol Wimber at one time said to John, if you do it, they'll just watch. And, of course, in the early days, John would be famous just to set the whole thing up and then walk off, and everybody had to jump in.
Yeah, leave them all to manage the mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of ministry and the rest. So, like, for you personally, I mean, I know that's who we've been in the Vineyard. Talk a little bit about, well, first just work some Bible if you have in your head. Like, how do we get this idea of equipping the saints? Not just us doing ministry, but part of doing ministry is teaching people to do the things that we're doing. So just what kind of scriptures impress upon you?
You have Paul's exhortation to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:2.
Yep.
Where that which I learned a lot of this from Gamaliel, Then I have this encounter with Jesus, and then I've been training. Now you take what you learned from me in the public arena, and you find people who will then find other people, okay? But then there's the other thing is Jesus, I think it's Mark 2, where Jesus says, follow me. And I don't know if Mark 1, Mark 2, I can't remember. Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men.
Yeah.
And then he did the training. He walked with them. Then he gave them the instruction in Matthew 28, okay? And that's go do this on your way. Do this. Teach everybody to do the things that I've instructed you to do. Teach the way of life that I've just taught you. That's the way Eugene Peterson said it in the Message. So there's really, I think, the picture of Moses and Joshua, that there was a reference that where when the Lord spoke to Joshua, he says, as I was with Moses, I'll be with you. Joshua had been riding side saddle with Moses for years. And he had been trained in hearing from the Lord and walking with the Lord. So training and sharing ministry it's not a one-off biblical thing. A lot of times we go to Ephesians 4, and fivefold ministry, and those gifts have been given to the church for the equipping of the saint. But I think we can extract equipping the saints in the entirety of the big narrative of the Bible.
Yeah, that's right. Well, here's a little Bible trivia, because here's a verse I really like. Do you remember? It's a quiz, Bible quiz.
Okay.
Do you remember? There's 2 times Jesus says he finished the work. Do you know what the 2 times are?
Well, I know it was said it is finished.
That's right.
In John.
Yep. Which is the cross, right?
Which is the cross.
There's another one.
There's a big one. Okay, go ahead.
See?
You like this, don't you?
I'm enjoying this
you
already.
Are. All right.
But
there are questions coming the other way.
No, I don't think that's how this works. I really love, genuinely, it's made a huge impact on my life. In John 17, in Jesus' prayer, where he's going to the cross, and he, is praying for his disciples. Then he's praying for who they will reach out to, right? Which is us, effectively. But he says this little weird thing in there where he says, I have finished the work in them, that through them the world might know. And
Yeah.
Which is quite a thing to say, right?
Yeah.
Like, so Jesus is, and by the way, we know the guys. So these aren't like
high shelf.
No. And we all know what's about to happen. He's about to go to the cross. They're about to all scatter effectively. But he still says, the thing that I set out to do, I've done in them, and I'm betting the farm on these guys.
Yeah.
The whole thing depends on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, I don't know, for me, I've just realized, and I ask pastors this all the time, don't you want to be able to say that at the end of all this? You know, like to look at a group of folks that you've given your life to and said, everything I have, everything I've known to do, I've tried to do. Now, it only took him a few years. It might take me a lifetime to get half of what I've sort of experienced from God into some people. But you could make, and you've, of course, read all the Master Plan of Evangelism and Dawson Trotman stuff with Born to Reproduce, all the things that had huge impact on me, that it seems as though the whole ministry strategy of Jesus is, I'm going to do things, but I'm mostly going to invest in a few folks.
Yeah.
That if they invest in a few folks, will change the world over time.
Yeah.
What a remarkable, radical plan. Not a PR plan, not a crowd plan, but a discipleship plan.
You mentioned Master Plan of Evangelism. Robert Coleman, I highly recommend that still to this day.
Me too.
Just read it again. You get bored with your assignment, read it again.
Yes.
Because that's really what it does. It's the simplicity of the few that have a few that have a few, and it happens. When it comes to the whole thing of equipping the saints, let's just put a little asterisk here, because let's look at it a different way. Because sometimes in the vineyard, I have felt it's used more as like an invitation to an all-inclusive resort.
Well, I like those though.
I
Phil.
know, but it's like, hey, everybody gets to play.
Yes.
As though then, so if you want to, come play. That I don't think is what Jesus was saying to the boys in Mark 2. And it depends on how we read it. Now, I'm not trying to add anything or manipulate the verse, but he says, I will make you become fishers of men. So if you're going to follow me, this piece really isn't an option for anybody that follows Jesus. You do the things he did. So we've used it can be, not always, but it can be just like you want to, in a culture of warmth and hospitality, hey, everybody gets to play. It's more than that. There's a mandate in this of sharing. And if you're a leader, you have a mandate to share whatever it is the Lord has done in you and through you. And then you give that away, then they give that away. It's just Paul said the same. Let me just, because some of these things come into my mind and then they run out the other side.
No, bring
so
it.
Fast.
Bring it. Please bring it.
Is Acts 20 when Paul said, I have been with you day and night, as he leaves the church of Ephesus.
Yeah.
And he says, I didn't hold back one thing I've given you. So there was a thoroughness to that. And day and night. And when he left, he knew he'd never see him again. So Paul was basically following Jesus' pattern of betting the farm that these boys would carry on.
Yes. No, that's good. So why do we even have to talk about it? I mean, if it's so plain, what we're saying is so plain. It's plain from the Old Testament story. It's plain from the ministry of Jesus. It's plain from the ministry of Paul, not just by way of model, but he then starts intentionally saying, hey, Timothy, this is what you got to do. He looks at the Ephesian elders as he's about to depart. He says, let me tell you what I've done. Let me tell you what you must do. And we can actually follow this, of course, through the early church. You can start to notice some of the early church fathers who were referring to how they were discipled by folks like John or others.
Okay.
If this is so plain, it's so clear, how do we get off message? Like, what are the things that make it hard for pastors to keep this central in how they think about ministry?
As you were asking that question, it just popped into my head that we today, if I was going to answer that in a contemporary way, is because the church system went in another direction, and we made superstars. We made the man of God, the woman of God, and they will have, and we've seen it when somebody's got a prophetic gift, people stop practicing the prophetic because he's going to give a word from the stage.
Totally.
Then we changed the word minister from a verb to a noun. He is the minister of that church. And so, although I think there is definitely a change in church today, I think a lot of it's because we've been beating this drum, and we've seen the clear reality of burnout by people who had one-man show, one-woman show. It's impossible, Jay. It's impossible.
It is.
So one is the systems, and then who doesn't like to be the man, right?
Yeah.
And
feel important, feel
important.
liked. Yeah.
You get some fruit, and yet Jesus, you see him ministering, and then if the crowd started together, he'd withdraw to a quiet place, like, hey, don't tell anybody I just healed you. We'd have just the opposite. You pray for somebody and their blind eye see, and the next thing you know, you're trying to fill stadiums, sell your books and your
Insta.
your wares.
Got to put it on Insta. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see the sort of celebrity culture plus the sort of psychological reality of everybody wants to feel important and interesting, sort of compounding this problem of sort of the one man, the one woman show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also, the truth is this work is hard work, right?
Yes.
Like when you go to invest in people in this sort of thorough way, you don't ever bat 100. Like the amount of people along the way that kind of go, Nah.
Yeah, I'm good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You start with 10 folks, let's say, and I'm going to help them think through these things really systematically and practice these things with the Bible or ministry in the Spirit or being a pastor or whatever, preaching, whatever it is. For you, what do you think has been sort of your batting average? I mean, if you look back over the years that you think, okay, of the people that I kind of really intentionally put in a spot, not I've preached to the room, because we're saying that is a different thing. It's an important thing. It's a different thing. But over the years, batting average, I think I got everything I wanted to get into them in a way that I saw them doing it and then putting it into others.
Yeah.
What do you think would be?
I just would have no way of
but
quickly just adding that up. But it has been.
It's not 100.
No, sir. I do know it's not 100. I just don't want to use that number. But that's a very interesting thing, because I am now in a second, third, and a third generation of preachers.
Yep.
Where I honestly fell into some amazing discipleship when I was freshly converted in 1974. So I really had somebody in my life saying, son, this is the way, walk in it. And there was discipleship, and it called to ministry. Mm-hmm. And then early on, reading Robert Coleman, Dawson Trotman, you've already mentioned, and others that were just, there's the way. Mm-hmm. And I never had any affinity towards largeness, but I loved pioneering. And I've spent most of my life pioneering. As a matter of fact, over the last 10 years in more managing and leading, it's not been that you do it because you asked to do it by the Lord, and okay, you do that. But I think, Jay, you're pushing a button right here. If our colleagues would get how great it would be if they took 10 or 12 and you pour years into them.
Yep.
So years ago, I instituted a thing where I did early morning, and it was young men, and then in other aspects, young women. But the early morning thing was mostly young men. But it was 5:30 in the morning, and if you missed 2, I basically said, you're not ready for this group. So if you just rolled over one morning and said, hey, I don't want to go, and from those groups through the years, I usually do 2-3 years. A lot of those young men are today in ministry, and young women.
So, okay, wait. This is important.
Yep.
I love everything you're saying. How many bailed out? You said, okay, so there's some that I had to
probably,
like a third?
Yeah, I would say a third. I mean, I have never done that.
No, I know. But what's interesting to me is,
I would say a third.
You're a highly capable guy. You're super gifted. You've had prolific ministry. You didn't just wake up yesterday and start doing this. You've been doing this a long time, and even in doing it a long time, you bet on certain people. You're investing a lot.
Yeah,
and a third, let's say, are just like, nah.
Yeah. No,
which
absolutely.
is like wild to think about. I mean, you see it in Jesus, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus' ministry. The amount of people are like, well, that was kind of cool. Nah.
I'm good. Sometimes I wonder if in God's great cosmic wisdom, he just said, Jesus, we have to set it up so you lose one, so the humans in the centuries afterwards don't feel so bad. Now, I'm kidding a little bit.
I don't know, man.
But there is a reality to that.
Oh, totally.
Stetzer would say, a great missiologist and ecclesiologist, he would say, you got to put 6 into the front end of the system to get 1 out.
Yes.
And if you remember those conversations 10, 11, 12 years ago, we were overwhelmed with that because we knew we had a season of a lot of retirements out of the vineyard, and we wanted to plant several hundred new churches. So we knew that was, we were in need of minimally 1,000 people that somewhere on the next journey, the next decade, could step into churches. So we basically, we took that as saying that we need to put 6,000 in the pipeline.
Yes.
And I don't even know if it would be a third for me through the years, but I can look back and see the groups.
That's right.
There was some that really caught it, and they stayed at it. Here's Jan. You've heard me say this 100 times. I'll just say it again. You don't change the game. I get calls and you get calls. Well, here's the famous line. What do you think the Lord's doing today? As though God is cosmically bored and has to come up with a new gig. And the fact of the matter is that's just not true.
Yes.
For leaders we can get discouraged because people drop out, or we get bored with it. Say, well, okay, I've discipled, and you disciple, you raise up leaders. And then, as you know, I always put a tagline on, evangelize, disciple, raise up your leaders, and include everybody, the diversity. Do it again.
Do it again.
Do it again. So I'm in a great transition in my life, but I know that going forward, I will gather another group of young men, and we'll start the process again of doing these things that Jesus showed these guys how to do, showed these people how to do, showed these women how to do, and on and on.
So back up a little bit. You mentioned something anecdotally I think probably be worth exploring. You said that early on for me, I was invested in really intentionally. And I've heard bits of the story, but describe some of the key mentors, leaders, because as you're first coming in, you don't know what you don't know. Like, if they told you to go stand on your head in the corner, you probably would. But because I don't know, I met Christ, I'll do whatever you want me to do. What kinds of things do they do with you? How do they grab a hold of you intentionally? Yeah. And it sounds like that almost immediately shaped how you thought about ministry. Like, I guess what's happening to me, I'm supposed to do to other people.
Thoroughly. And recently, it came up in faith walking, where we were talking a lot about first formation. Yeah. But in the group I was in, we were talking about our family and our personal first formation. Yep. And I just transferred that to what is it when somebody comes to Christ, they're converted, they start following Jesus. Out of the gate, that is so huge. And I had, I don't know, there's a phrase, born with a silver spoon in your mouth or something. I can't remember how that goes. Yeah, right. But it indicates you had an easy road. Well, the fact of the matter is, I had a sensational man lead me to Christ that I didn't know from anybody. He was a Penn State graduate, Princeton graduate. He was one of the first Protestant missionaries to go into Japan at the end of World War II at the invitation of Douglas MacArthur. And he had ministered all over Southeast Asia for years and years and years. Wow. And then when the Japanese began in the late 60s, early 70s, they began immigrating to Brazil because Brazil was giving away massive pieces of land to Japanese immigrants because they were excellent farmers. And they had all these natural resources. So fast forward, this man began ministering. He decided to start going to Brazil and ministering to the Japanese immigrants. He was recruiting high school and college kids all over the United States to go do this work in Brazil. I happened to fall into a meeting with that guy was the speaker. I'd never been to a Christian meeting. I had never heard the gospel until that night. He explained the gospel in a way that was like, Jay, just what you and I do every day, as pastors, but crystal clear. Man is separated from God. And he walked us through the steps. Wow. 10 minutes afterwards, I prayed a prayer. And he prayed with me. 10 minutes later, he says, how would you like to go with me to Brazil this summer? And tell the young people in Brazil what just happened to you. And my response was, what happened to me? I didn't even know what he was talking about. Right. He said that Jesus just came into your life. He's forgiven your sin, and he's going to start showing you your very purpose in life. I go, sure, I'd love to do that. And 3 months later, I'm with him in Brazil. I was 16, 17 years old, and he was an amazing, amazing man of God, brilliant, had a good chunk of the Bible memorized. He took us that summer, and then I had to finish high school. And then he asked us to come live with him for 1 year at the mission compound that he ran. And for a year, I met with him for 2.5 hours, and he took me through the New Testament, verse by verse. First formation. Wow. He poured it into my gut. So I thought, this is what you do. You lead someone to Christ, And then you begin doing with them what was done to you, and you teach them to do it to others. And so I've had 3 pretty strong mentors that have kept my feet to the fire. Earl Tiger, who's now with the Lord. Bob Fulton welcomed me into the Vineyard and poured a lot of Vineyard stuff. He really, really was one of the glues into the Vineyard. And then I had a later in life mentor that many people that know me, they've heard me say his name, Dr. Bob. And he is the one in probably mid-90s, 95, 6, started talking to me about my interior life. And he would say, he had a great voice for podcasts. He'd say, Phil, how's your soul? So in that, Jay, I really believe that first formation has set me on a path that we've been on now 47 years.
Each quarter on the We Are Vineyard podcast, we will focus in on a theme for all of our interviews. For the first quarter of 2022, the theme is Equipping the Saints. And every month, we're going to introduce a new recommended book or resource to dig in deeper. This month, we're recommending that everyone reads Strong and Weak by Andy Crouch. Later this month, we'll interview Andy to hear a deeper dive on this book and much more. Strong and Weak is available through Vineyard Resources and wherever books are sold.
And so, like you, I have conversations like this with people.
Yeah.
And my story's not that different than yours. You know, a few very critical people, very intentionally invested in my life in a way that, much like you said, at the time, I didn't understand.
No, I had no idea.
That it was an unusual experience. I thought, oh, this is just what people do. And that's shaped every bit of my ministry life. So as I talk to people about this, leaders, pastors, one of the things they have to process often instantly is, I don't think that happened to me.
Yes.
Like I came to Christ and the basic thing I was told to do, or maybe I was raised in church, was show up at meetings, be at church every Sunday. If you're extra into it, go to a Bible study. And they were mostly sort of discipled within larger group contexts, and then somebody taught a class on teaching the Bible, and so then they taught the Bible once. People were like, "Man, you're pretty good," and next thing you know, they're a pastor, and they listen to us talking right now, and they suddenly it starts to dawn on them, wait a minute, the thing you're describing, that's super intentional, time with another person, never really happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now I don't feel like I know how to turn around and do that somewhere else. What would you want to say to that kind of person?
I think you've nailed it. We hear that a lot. Mm-hmm. That never happened to me. Mm-hmm. And you have deep regret on that. But at some point, that needs to stop. So, well, you can end that. If something doesn't happen to you, and then you realize, gee, that would have been a good thing, you just generationally have to pick it up and start the ball rolling from there on, in one sense.
Yep.
As you were saying that, I was thinking, our church planters, good church planters that I've known through the years, are people that come from atmospheres and environments where church planting is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And it's probably the same with this discipleship thing or equipping the saints, especially in the intensity of equipping the saints. Like, I will make you become a fisher of men, right? Mm-hmm. If that didn't happen to you, there's a good chance that's not happening from you. Mm-hmm. But I would think somebody listening to the podcast could say, instead of saying, gee, I never got that, so I don't know what those guys are talking about, but they sort of do know what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I would just, as a simple say, okay, I'm going to start do this. I think there's also a lot of pressure on pastors to get more because of the whole consumerism and you get a little bit of recognition, significance, status, and all that in a bag of potato chips. More numbers, were sort of led away from the intensity. And if you did 10 really good, it would probably be better than 100 that are just going to sort of walk.
Listen to a sermon. Right.
But we just don't have a culture that applauds for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
One of the phrases I used to use is first row, second row, third row. I think it was the first church we did in Santiago, Chile. We literally had a front row where the guys who were in Bible college, they were, working, going to school at night, everything into the church, and there was probably 15 of them. And then as some of them began to take up leadership positions, and one went to be a missionary in Ecuador, another one went to plant a church in Concepcion in southern Chile, I realized, now I started looking at the second and the third row. And I realized there really is. It's like, there's a team they're ready. It's AAA, they're ready to go up and take a swing. But there's AA and
You've
single
got to be
A.
intentional, to your point. You got to keep looking is the key. Do it again,
This is hard work because it is, and it's applauding work. Mm-hmm. Left foot, right foot. It really is. And then we could say, what's the content of this? I'll just tell you, for me.
Yeah, I want to hear that.
One would have been how intensely I was influenced in first formation of how important the Bible was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't regret that one bit. How intentionally prayer, and then there was some, just some crazy stuff. Sacrifice, engage. I'll make you, and I often talk about this through the years. Is do I really have to get involved with people's lives? Like, yes.
Yeah, I can just preach and write emails, right?
And I can write devotionals, but no,
right.
do I have to get in messy lives? Yes. That's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
So for you said Bible, prayer, sacrifice, engaging, involved in people's lives, which...
Missional.
Yeah, because I know you, that means evangelism.
Evangelism.
Not just pastoring.
No. Evangelism, being with... Like, here's an example.
Mm-hmm.
In one of the churches we planted in Portland, Maine, you start gathering some men and women groups and things like that. And I said, what would it be like for first few years if we don't invite any Christian speakers to our group, but we invite the mayor? We had a professional hockey coach that was, at that time, the Portland Pirates. He went on to become he won the Stanley Cup in the NHL about 10 years later.
Wow.
So, we just had anyone in the community, the police chief, the fire chief, we had I had the coach come in from the Class A state champ, South Portland Bulldogs. Nice guy. He and I play golf once in a while. Probably a mainline denominational guy, nominal at best. But he came in, and, he was a motivational guy, right? He talked about being his was a seed, a sapling is the only things that can turn into a sequoia, and you can just see he's been developing young football players. So, you start out as a seed, and then everybody doesn't pay attention to you. You're nothing but a little sapling. He says, but that's the only thing that turns into a sequoia. He did a great job. So then he ended it. He forgot his audience. He got so wrapped up in his pep talk that he told a dirty joke.
That's good.
And all the guys were, trying not to laugh. They were like, nervous and looking at each other.
Totally.
And afterwards they said, John, you got to remember your audience.
Do you remember where you are? Yeah.
And I said, but I guarantee it's not the first off-color joke those guys have heard.
Yes, that's
but
right.
I share that just to say, I got some pushback at the first, but only from church people. You're going to have Barry Trotzman. He's the guy that won the Stanley Cup. You're going to have him. He doesn't know Jesus.
Yeah.
I said, well, yeah, we didn't ask him to preach. We asked him to come share his story.
Yeah.
A lot of those things, and then, our lives have to get messed up. So part of the formation is not just the Word of God. It's not just the prayer. For me, the inner life formation came later. I didn't even know that. Matter of fact, some of my first formation was prejudicial against that because so much of it came from our Catholic brothers and sisters. But keeping your hands messy with humanity was something that Earl Tigert put in me really, really quick. 'Cause we worked, I mean, the work in Brazil was not like church work. It was street work. We worked with, it was
just hard.
drug addict.
And what's interesting
prostitutes.
listening to you, Phil, and speak to this a little bit, is so when you meet Dr. Bob in the 90s, how old are you around that time? I mean, because, you know.
I would have been just turning 40.
Okay, so that means that into 40, you're still saying, I need some intentional mentors,
Yes.
people in my life, which strikes me because what we just talked about a moment ago, people say, well, I don't have this. I must have missed my window. You can just go find people to invest in you now. I mean, I'm stunned at how many
Yes.
times when I walk up to people and just say, there's this thing you do, or there's this way you do this thing, or there's this thing I don't understand that somehow happens when you teach or when you pray or that I don't get. Can I just tag along? Can
Yeah.
I just get to know what you do? Can I, wherever you're doing, whatever you're doing, can I just be there?
Yeah.
Can I buy you lunch? You might know Floyd McClung. You know, he was
Yes. YWAMer.
YWAMer, director of YWAM. And I'd seen a thing he was going to be speaking at in the middle of the mountains, and I'd read a bunch of his stuff and always admired him. So I drove up there and walked in this meeting. It's like a few hundred people. He's teaching, and it was incredible. Great. I mean, just powerful time. Well, anyway, I just walked up to him as he came off the stage and said, hey, my name's Jay. I live in Denver. He's like, oh, you're a part of the YWAM thing here? No, I just showed up. He's like, oh. And I go, I would love to take you to lunch. And he goes, well, I think I'm supposed to do something. These guys brought me, there's a lunch I think I'm supposed to go to. I go, well, what is it? He goes, I don't really know. I go, well, it doesn't sound like it's that important. If you don't even know what it is, can I please take you to lunch? And he goes, he just looks at me and kind of smiles. He goes, sure. And that started
Yes.
a real lasting friendship.
Yes.
Where, you know, he would just walk with me and talk to me about life. When he'd be somewhere in the States, even because he lived I would try to fly to be near where he was.
Yeah.
Flew out to do stuff that he did. We woke up every morning, went to South Africa. He and I walked on the beach every morning for like 10 days.
Yep.
And I just asked him everything. I just peppered him with questions. Then he would ask me things. And I think back on that, and I think, so some guy just walks up to him off the stage.
Yes.
And he says, sure, I'll do that. I think there's more of that available than people realize.
Yes. Both ways. There's people that could walk up to you
Yes.
right now and just say, can I talk to you? Would you have lunch? Or you can walk up to people.
Yep.
Now, I met Dr. Bob because when I planted in Portland, Maine, this was like 1993-ish, I asked around. I said, who's the players in Portland? Who's the players? And his name kept coming up. And he was the pastor of the largest First Baptist Church of Kenko Road. And his name came up in such an endearing way, I thought, I got to go meet this guy.
I wonder who this is. Right?
I made an appointment, and I went in, and I introduced myself. I said, I'm Phil Strout. I said, Dr. Bob, I said, your name, everybody I talked to about planting a church here in Portland, your name comes up. Oh, he says, you're so generous. And I said, no, it just does. And he says, well, who are you working with? I said, I'm a Vineyard guy, and I'm going to plant a Vineyard church. Oh, we love the Vineyard. And he had some niece, nephew, granddaughter had been at Steve Nicholson's church in Evanston. And so he said, yeah. He said, and I said, would you mind maybe at some point telling me about what God's doing in Portland, Maine in the 90s? And, oh, that'd be wonderful. And that's how it all started. And so we became friends and met with him, I don't know, maybe 3-4 times a year for 2 or 3 years. Then I asked him to come preach at our church. We had this fledgling little group, and come to find out he had done his postgraduate work at Fuller under George Ladd.
Wow.
He was a total kingdom guy. As a conservative Baptist, don't try to connect those dots because they don't connect.
Yeah.
Okay. But he was amazing. Well, then he retires. Oh no, the Lord told him to retire, and he didn't. A year later, this would have been 90, maybe 5 or 6. He got in a car accident on his way to sunrise service at the church, and the Lord said, "I told you, you're done."
Wow.
He resigned that night.
A lot of lessons
Resigned
there.
that night.
Yeah.
And he went to, and then the Association of Evangelicals of New England asked him and funded him to pick 25 young leaders around New England and mentor them. And when he told me about that, I begged him if I could be one of the guys. So some of this you have to go. You got to go. You
That's
want
right.
that? Go do it.
Get it.
Go
Yeah.
see somebody that you resonate with, and you know they've got something you don't have. Just goes. I literally said, "Is there any room in this for a vineyard guy?" Oh, Phil, of course, yes. He and I met for 15 years.
Wow.
2 hours a month for 15 years. I got to be careful. I can break down right now.
Yeah.
He never asked me about my church. Because I've been in church work for years, for decades, right? He asked me every time I saw him for 15 years, "Phil, how's your soul?"
Yeah.
And a few times I tried lying to him.
I'm good.
I'm good. How's Jan? He adored my wife. How's Janny? I said, "Oh, good. We might have had the worst fight of our marriage the day before." But I could never lie to him. I couldn't stick for more than 10 minutes because we'd get further into the conversation. And I'd say, "Hey, remember when I said I'm okay 10 minutes ago? I'm not. I'm a stinking wreck."
Yeah.
And that was something, it was a gift from God that I needed. And that formed a lot of some of the stuff I've brought to the vineyard in my little tiny contribution about the inner life and soul care and how to have fruitful longevity.
Yep.
So this thing of he was equipping me, but his equipping was not in tactical and strategic work in the church. His training to me, and then what I've tried to do with that, was the interior life has to match the public life. Because he always said, if your private life does not match your public life, sooner or later it comes tumbling down.
Yep.
And I was like, brilliant.
Well, and how? So again, this is a little concrete, but when you first meet him, you have no church, or you have a very little church.
I had a fledgling small group.
Okay, so you, I mean, at the risk of offending you, for a guy who's like the big deal in town, you roll in with pretty much nothing.
Nothing.
And are like, "Hey, man,
You want to hang out?
let's hang out."
No presumption there.
And he's like, yeah, sure. And he does few times a year or whatever for a while.
Yeah.
Then he has this other opportunity. And again, you pop up. And I'm trying to do the math on that. So that means that you are in your mid-40s or so around then.
Yes, 40. Well, 40. Yeah, right around there.
Yeah. So, I mean, and this should not be a controversial thought. But when he's supposed to get young leaders, 40 doesn't count, I don't think.
I think I went out and got some of that color your beard and got the gray out, grew my hair a little longer. I did something. Lost 10 pounds. I don't know what I did.
You're like, I'm going to be a young leader, whatever it takes. Yeah. And so again, what's interesting is so many of the things you're describing aren't just like magical moments. You know, it's not like,
No.
And then an angel appeared and he was glowing, or I was glowing, and he was like, "I see the Lord on you." It's like this fairly boring, practical, intentional work of making an appointment, showing up as a learner, asking questions. And then you weren't even necessarily thinking, I need somebody to help me with my soul.
No.
Didn't even really know. But there's something about this leader. And then that leader starts to do these kinds of things with you. And this is where we do have to believe in the sovereignty of God. Somehow, God graciously partnered with your activity to put you with the right person at the right time, at the right stage of your life to do this kind of work. That's like such a miracle.
St. Ignatius always said, pay attention. Pay attention. Pay attention. And when I first started reading that, I was like, well, okay, pay attention. Because we believe, it's so hand in glove with what we believe theologically and practically is God's always at work.
Yes.
So I was just thinking, as you were saying that, Jay, there's guys and gals listening to this, even to this podcast, and I would say pay attention because there's people that are coming to you looking for training, looking for friendship, looking for help me walk through this next stage. And then a wise man is always looking to see who God's putting in your path that can be. I have always said I like it if somebody's 10 or 15 years older than me, and has not just chronologically in age, but in kingdom experience, church experience, leadership experience. Because if somebody's 40 years, 50 years, they're forgetting. It's like trying to have somebody's got a church of 3,000 people doing a church growth weekend with, churches of 30.
Right.
Get that church of 300 to help that one.
That's
right.
Too big a gap.
Yeah,
right.
It's just too big a gap. So now it's a little bit harder because those people now have to be in their 80s for me. But I still say they're there, and I pay attention. I recognize when I'm around them, and I'll hunt them down. And I still sort of play the innocent, dumb old guy, hey, I can't figure this out.
So ask questions, show up as a learner.
Yep. And then I'm looking to see who's coming my way. Like in this transition right now, one of the things I'm excited about, it's got really nothing to do with you and I transitioning here, as much as having more time at Pathway Vineyard. I've realized over the last 3 or 4 months, I've been looking in a way that I haven't had the opportunity to for the last decade because I just have not been around.
Yeah.
Where's that next? And so, this 4 or 5, 30-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 30, 35-year-olds that I think, they're there.
So let's wrap up with this. Like, if you're looking, what are you looking for? So you're responding to people that come toward you.
Yep.
And you're saying, yeah, let's do the things. Let's think through the Bible. Let me talk to you about how to pray. And let's do some praying. Let's put you together with some other folks. So that you're doing. But when you're looking, what are you looking for? You're looking across a room. You're looking through the church.
Yeah. For me, and this is just mine. I've heard the one of who's setting up chairs, who's staying late.
Right.
Okay, good. That's good. I agree. I think that's a piece of it. What I have found is the ones that come asking the intriguing questions. They've made a step, and then when you ask questions back, they're pensive and they're engaging. That's for
curiosity.
Me. Curiosity, inquisitiveness, asking questions, and that has been one of the big ones. Because if they're uninterested, I've never felt I had to be the salesman to get them there.
Yes.
But if they are interested, I have felt a moral and ethical obligation to let it come a little bit further. That's why I've always done those groups at 5:30 in the morning.
Because
they want to get up in the morning.
They gotta want to.
They gotta want to do that. Now I'll do coffee. I'll do lunches and all that. But and again, that's just me. I'm not saying that's my methodology has been. And that group, if I looked at the batting average with that methodology, it's pretty high, to be honest.
It's real high,
yeah.
right?
Then I'd take them through some, I'll spend a year on the life of Walter Ciszek. I won't go into who he is, but that's been a big piece for me. Then we'll do every group I take through Tim Keller's Reason for God. Do some apologetical work, but they have to do the work. Then you see their interest. So if they're interested, because of the intensity we're talking about.
Yep.
If they're interested, I'm interested. If they're not, that means they just need to be flipped over a few more times in the oven.
Right. And that's not up to you.
And that's not up to me.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. For me, you may have heard this story, but when Rich Nathan hired me, he hired me to be his intern, sight unseen. I didn't really know him. And I get a call from Rich, which is terrifying. I don't know why he's calling me.
Yeah.
And I show up. I've been waiting tables. He walks me around the parking lot. And he asks me 100 questions in a row. I don't even know what we're doing. I don't know why he's called me. I'm thinking he's going to prophesy my sin or something. But like the third lap around the parking lot, I finally said, "What are we doing?" I don't know what I'm doing. He goes, "Oh, I wanted to hire you to be my intern."
Interviewing you.
Yeah. And I go, "Oh, I didn't know what we were doing." He goes, "Oh, I didn't say that to you." I go, "No, I didn't even know what this was." And I said, "So why are you, well, we don't even know each other. I don't know how this happened." And he said, "Well, Jay, there's a lot of people that are way more qualified than you for this job." And I thought, "Oh, that's
It's a good start.
comforting." Yeah, right. Thank you. He goes, "But there's this thing that I've tried to train myself to watch for, which is when people hunger and thirst for God." He goes, "Because I can't put that in people. I don't know how that happens. Some of that's a mystery. But when I see it, I'm confident
Pounce on it.
that
Yes.
person will grow and I can help them grow. And I see that in you. So I want to invest in you. I think this is something God has for your life." And it was funny leaving because I don't think I realized how significant it was, obviously, at the time, because I was, like most of us, I keyed in on the negative part, which was you're not very qualified. But now, many years later, I can see, wow, that was about the best compliment I think I could be paid in my life.
Yeah.
And it trained me to watch for that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people aren't as qualified.
Yeah.
They're not, maybe as bright.
Yeah.
Or they're not as sort of interesting, or
Paul put a little qualifier there in 2 Timothy 2:2.
yeah,
Because he says, "Don't you give it," and he's talking leadership. We're putting a little of that into the passage, but
Yeah.
exactly what you just said. Give it away to people who are apt, who will then or can or have the skill to or have the willingness to give it away to others.
give it away. That's right.
So that's not a yeah.
It's great. Well, Phil, I personally am grateful for you, how you've invested in me and how we're moving through this transition. You have been a champ. I'm really grateful for you. And I feel honored and humbled to even have this conversation with you because guys like me are just picking the fruit off the trees of what men like you have sowed. And
Well, you're
grown.
kind, Jay. We're just going to keep doing this until we don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Until the Lord said, "That's enough."
Hey, well, amen. And I'm looking forward to keep doing it with you.
Many
grateful
years.
for you. Really
you.
grateful. And maybe we'll get to talk again sometime
I
soon.
bet we will. Thanks.
The We Are Vineyard podcast is a production from the team at Vineyard USA. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. Leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Connect with us online for additional resources. Our website is vineyardusa.org, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at @VineyardUSA. Thanks for listening. See you next week.